Rewind, one of 5 ways to control time.
So, after playing through all of Drakengard and getting all of the endings and spending over 2 years making one video that made me suffer more than it made me happy, I decided that I wanted to change pace for the next video because there are plenty of other games that I want to talk about, but I decided I kind of want to keep on this train that I'm going on of talking about games that are not just older, but are also important in kind of the steps that we took to get to where modern video games are today. And I had a lot of choices on my plate that I wanted to take a look at, but decided that the next game that I really wanted to talk about was going to be Prince of Persia. Now, that's not just because I think Prince of Persia is a really good game. In fact, before making this video, I had never played it before. And that was truly what motivated me to pick up this game. Despite pretty much on the back of the box having every single aspect of a game that I enjoy, mostly being a thrilling narrative and also really fun platforming and combat, I never got around to playing this as a kid. I'm still not completely sure why that was. You know, the Prince used to be everywhere, at least to me as a kid in the 2000s. You'd go to Family Video, Blockbuster, Toys R Us, all of these different places that had gaming content, and you'd see at least one poster, you'd see at least one copy of the game. He was always just there in my peripheral vision. For some reason, other games took precedence over this one, and I just never got around to playing it. And, you know, I actually think that's okay, because had I played it as a kid, I would have only enjoyed it for nostalgia's sake now, but as an adult getting to play this game for the first time, I think it's actually really exciting to get to kind of look at this not only with the lens of this being my first time playing it, but also through the perspective of somebody that's played a lot of video games at this point, and while I don't know everything, know enough about the industry and how games are made to appreciate this with a lot more weight than I would have as a child. This game has been in Ubisoft's IP jail for well over a decade at this point, and we're probably never going to see another game in this series again, especially after the flop of the reboot that they attempted back on the 360 PS3 era, as well as their attempt to make a movie based off of the Sands of Time series, which for some reason starred Jake Gyllenhaal and the actor that played the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. The 2000s were a really odd time. Anyways, you know, regardless of terrible decisions that were made with the series later on, when the Prince of Persia Sands of Time series was coming out, it was not only an incredible game then, it's held up to criticism even in today's age. And I think that's really cool. With that said, I do want to go ahead and get started with this series. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first game in this trilogy, Prince of Persia Sands of Time for the PlayStation 2.
Most people think time is like a river that flows swift and sure in one direction. But I have seen the face of time, and I can tell you, they are wrong. Time is an ocean in a storm. You may wonder who I am and why I say this. Sit down, and I will tell you a tale like none that you have ever heard. Know first that I am the son of Shahram, a mighty king of Persia. On our way to Azad with a small company of men who passed through India, where the promise of honor and glory tempted my father into a grievous error.
No, my son.
Your Majesty,
I trust you will remember your promise. The Maharaja's treasure vaults lie within.
See how he fights. Like a warrior's son.
In this game, we follow the prince as he recounts his fantastic story of magic and tragedy. We open on the prince and his father's army, ransacking a city in order to plunder it for treasure and women. This prologue is also our introduction to the basic mechanics of the game. Now, I did not know much about this game before playing it, but one of the few things I did learn is that the Prince of Persia series is the predecessor to Assassin's Creed. I didn't think this would be that obvious until the controls were explained. Square is your attack, circle sheathes and unsheathes your weapon, and X is jump. You use the R1 button to activate your free running abilities as well. The movement also has a lot of similarities as well, minus the ability to wall run. Man, I really wish Altair and Ezio could wall run. That would make the game so much better. Just like in Assassin's Creed, when you get into a state of flow and move between points without effort, it feels really good. But every now and then, something goes wrong. After getting a handle on the platforming, we move deeper into the palace to find the treasure within. It's at this point the game takes the time to tell me to be sure not to touch the spiky pole. Had I not read this, I'm not sure what would have happened. On the topic of those spiky poles, though, one of the things that Prince of Persia does well is the difficulty curve. New concepts and challenges are introduced one at a time, giving you space to learn how they work, eventually mixing those new challenges together with the old ones. From here on, traps will be pretty common, with new types showing up from time to time. Once we get to the room the treasure is held in, we also get introduced to falling ledges. They don't happen often, but now we know they exist and to be wary of our footholds. This is also a good room to show the increase in difficulty with familiar concepts. We know columns can be climbed and jumped between, and we know how to do it. Now we're told, alright, now do it 3 stories off of the ground. I'll try not to harp on it too much, but the jumping and wall running can be very tough and need some time to get used to. I still haven't gotten it down to a science, but I think it has something to do with the way the prince magnetizes to surfaces. There are a few spots where you'll be standing in the corner and the camera is facing in such a way that when you approach a wall, you will almost always do the opposite of what you want. I think the most common way I've had this happen is I'm attempting to approach a wall with the goal of running straight up it, but instead I'll wall run along the side wall and hit my face straight into the wall I wanted to climb. It's not the worst thing in the world, but small moments like this would ruin the flow of a level for me often in the beginning. The satisfaction in a 3D platformer like this comes from the fluidity of movement and your ability as a player to read the environment and pull off that awesome run without stopping. It's one thing when your own skill gets in the way, you misread the depth of a jump, or you take the wrong path, but it's another when you know what you want to do and do all the inputs you need to pull it off, and the system that you're in fails you.
Time to get out. Now.
After falling more times than I should trying to climb the statue, I make it up to the dagger. Now that we have the dagger, we return to the main treasure room and another cutscene plays.
Oh.
Father, I have brought us honor and glory.
Your Majesty, you promised me my choice of the Maharaja's treasures. That dagger.
Surely you won't deny the lad a souvenir of his first battle. You may have your choice of all the Maharaja's other treasures. Accept that hourglass. That will make a fine gift for the Sultan of Azad when we pass through his city. And some exotic animals for his menagerie. And a few dozen slave girls. Yes, that should be enough. I want no animals or maidens harmed until I have chosen. Let it be known, King Shahraman is merciful in victory.
Trust not a man who has betrayed his master, nor take him into your own service, lest he betray you too. I learned the truth of this to my sorrow, the day that we arrived in Azad as the Sultan's honored guests.
My friend.
My friend, your visit brings joy and honor to my poor and humble dwelling. If only you'd given me time to prepare a proper welcome.
The glories of Azad are famed throughout the world. And yet, the best is yet to come. I give you the Sands of Time. May the friendship between our kingdoms endure as long as time itself.
The sand, why does it glow?
I can tell you. Inside the hourglass is a marvel that no living man has seen. Alas, only the dagger can unlock the sands of time, and it belongs to a greater one than I. A young prince, dearer to his father than all the wealth of India. Perhaps he will oblige.
No. No! Stop!
Is it meant to do this? Alicia Sigataha!
Give me the dagger.
No.
You have unleashed the sands of time. I can undo what you have done. Give it to me now.
After the prince is tricked into releasing the Sands of Time, the world falls to ruin. The citizens and soldiers alike are warped into terrifying creatures similar to zombies. In the cutscenes, it seems to be that only people touched by the sand are transformed, but the prince does not. I'm guessing because he wields the dagger. After this, we're introduced to how combat will work for the rest of the game. We're no longer fighting humans, but sand demons. They can't be killed unless their sand is returned to the dagger. After knocking them down, we have to stab them with it. When done well, the combat can feel satisfying, hopping from enemy to enemy, balancing between knocking down enemies and returning sand to the dagger. But, as we'll find out later, this fun can easily be overpowered by numbers. After we finish the fight, we're introduced to save points, which also show us hints of what will come in the next platforming segment. I didn't need to review the footage often, but in the moments that I needed it, I was happy that the creators gave you a bit of a hand. This first platforming room took me much longer than it should have. There's a broken staircase in front of you and a balcony on the other side. The drop doesn't look that high to the other side of the broken stairs, so the first thing I attempt is just to jump to the other side, and I die. Then I thought, okay, that height was too much. What if I grab onto the ledge, lower myself down, and land that way? I die again. Now I'm racking my brain thinking of any possible solution. I know that the balcony on the other side is too far for me to reach with a wall run, and I know that if I run to the other side of the stairs, I'll be too far off the ground to land without dying. After way too much thought, I finally decided to just wall run to the other side. I was fine. That was the answer. Maybe my depth perception is off, but to me, it looks like the fall I took off the ledge from a hang was a much shorter distance to the ground than what I just did. I think it may not have been the distance, but a kill box of some kind that got me. Now, I might be wrong here, but I think this is what was supposed to happen. If you wall run for too long, eventually you start to descend down the wall. This part of the opening level was supposed to show you that you can do that. They tried to take away every other possible answer from you. You can't drop down, jump, or go in any other direction. They tunnel you in. Then they put the balcony on the other side, almost like bait. And the worn down wall looks like a guide for your feet. Great idea overall, except my answer was also right. This is pretty much the only example I have in this game where I was punished for coming up with an alternate solution. We continue platforming through the destroyed palace, chasing after a mysterious woman. At this point, we see more of what I mentioned earlier. We know how to wall run and swing on poles, but in this room, those skills are combined. After reaching a safe point and exploring deeper into the palace, a faint sound can be heard coming from a hole in the wall. When inspecting it closer and passing through to the other side, the sound grows, almost calling out to us as we wander down a hallway adorned with silk. This liminal space eventually opens up into a cavern, leading us to a fountain.
Hello? Is anyone there? I have a feeling I'm not in Azad anymore.
With nothing else to do, we drink the water from the fountain, and a power envelops us, and our health increases. We're then spit back out where the hole was, now gone. These health fountains are one of the collectibles that we can find throughout the game. The other being the clouds of sand scattered about the platforming sections. When we gather enough sand, our amount of sand we can carry increases as well. The dagger itself and the sand it consumes can do quite a few things. The first being able to rewind time. This is essentially the game's version of extra lives. If you make a bad jump or hit a trap that you didn't see, you can rewind time to before that event happened. But it can also be used in combat. If you press triangle while fighting, you stab the dagger into an enemy and freeze them in place. This is good for crowd control if you're getting overwhelmed, as well as dropping larger enemies that block your normal attacks. When it comes to the sand, I found myself being very conservative with it and constantly rationing it. I do think that part of it is that Prince of Persia is such a fun and engaging platformer that I regularly forgot that sand was even a mechanic. After a few more introductory platforming and combat segments, we meet Farah, the princess of the kingdom that the prince robbed of the Sands of Time, which also means that our army killed her father and imprisoned her. Farah escapes behind a crack in the wall, and we continue our journey through the palace. As we head outside, we get a sweeping shot of the tower of the palace and winged creatures taking the Sands of Time to the top.
The hourglass. What? I did not understand the meaning of what I had just seen.
Once we get to the bottom of our current room, we learn another mechanic that just pulls me back to early Assassin's Creed games, the parry. It works pretty much the same way as it does in AC 1 and 2. Hold down the right trigger, and when the timing is right on an enemy swing, hit either square or triangle to execute a parry. The triangle parries are dagger-based, and squares are sword-based. After learning this, I fell into old habits fairly quickly, bouncing between enemies and parrying to get the kill. Sadly, this doesn't seem to be the optimal way to fight, at least for me. Reading parry timings was pretty difficult for me, so I found myself rarely using them and relying on dodges and backstabs instead. We're now introduced to moving objects by moving a bookshelf to reveal a hidden passage. This next moment is super from a game design point. We're first shown a new way of interacting through the world by moving the bookcase. Right, now we know that we can push things. Then we get a button on the ground with a timed release. Then on the other side of the room, we get a switch that immediately releases when you walk off, and on the exact opposite side of that button is a box. For most of us that have played games in the past, it's immediately apparent what you need to do. But even if this was your first game, this one moment teaches you 3 concepts that are pivotal to how puzzles will be built moving forward in just a few seconds. After putting the box on the button, we head into the next room, and an absolutely massive mechanical lock waits for us to solve it. Despite being pretty easy and early on in the game, this is probably one of the most memorable puzzles in the game, along with another later on. The scale of it, along with the design, just make it seem so awesome. It's pretty easy though. The mechanism we just turned on is essentially the power for the traps inside of the palace. The hope being that they will deter the demons, but in turn, making the prince's journey more difficult. Another trap is introduced. Spike floors. These things drove me crazy, and let's be clear, they shouldn't. They only activate when you run over them. If you slowly walk past, you're fine. Most of the time, these are used in 2 ways, to control the speed you progress through a room, and to funnel you into the correct direction. I want to move fast. I can't help it. So I found myself dying to these spikes more than I should, not just because I would rush, but because I would become so tunnel visioned on what I thought the solution to a room was, I would ignore all clear indicators that I was in fact wrong, namely spikes. We continue forward using our knowledge of all the traps and movement techniques we've learned up to this point, combining wall kicks, bar swings, and wall runs until we reach the end. This is when the game is at its peak for me. I can take or leave the combat, but these longer segments where it's just non-stop platforming, sight reading my next line to the goal, solving jumps mid-run, that's when this game is really satisfying. We've now circled back to where we started in the palace and find Farah fighting sand demons. One of them, our father. This battle was tough. There's no gimmick, no trick or strat, just hit hard and often. I kept getting dogpiled here, so I thought maybe I was doing something wrong and looked up a game fact. It really seems like they are endless, but you'll find the bottom of the barrel eventually. I also kept starting this fight with half health because I forgot to heal ahead of time, which did not help at all. Eventually I remembered that there was a pool at the back of the room that had water I could drink to restore my health. This actually was a good learning opportunity. I had assumed that the health restores would only be available at the end of a fight in the next room, but no, most large fights will have a fountain in the room with you. You still shouldn't plan on using them because it is a risk. The animation can't be canceled at certain points, which means once you start drinking, you're partially committed, and it can lead to having less health than when you started drinking water. But more often than not, you gotta do what you gotta do. We kill our dad and his friends, and we link back up with Farah. She convinces us to right the wrong we've done and return the sands to the hourglass that we saw earlier at the top of the tower.
I'm sorry.
Why?
I know what it is to lose a father.
I'll start the story from here next time.
So, this is the thanks I get for saving your life.
You don't understand. I need that dagger to undo.
To undo what I have done. Truly you must think I'm a fool.
You are right to be cautious. But fight as bravely as you may, you cannot defeat this enemy.
At this point, Farah has joined us on our quest and will assist us throughout. This game feels so modern at times that I often forget what year it originally came out. I feel like most of my younger years, I heard people complain about escort missions and companions just being bad, getting in the way, dying easily, not following closely enough, or getting too far away. Farah, in my playthrough at least, had none of these problems. It felt just as intuitive as Uncharted, God of War, or The Last of Us. Now, she's nowhere near as complex or interactable as the examples I just gave, but she does her job well. Farah can shoot arrows during combat, stunning enemies and giving us an opening. In platforming rooms, she assists us with puzzles by sliding through cracks in walls, and is the second main character of the game, allowing the prince someone to bounce off of in dialogue. The relationship throughout the game is a fun one to watch grow and really helped me keep immersed and motivated to continue my journey to find the hourglass. The way I think they got around the pitfalls of most early companion NPCs is that she isn't just attached to you following behind. She's independent and finds her own solutions to the exit or kindly waits for you to create a path for her. It's great. After fighting more sand demons, I begin to notice the pattern of the levels. Fight some monsters, platform to a new location, and fight some more monsters, repeat. This isn't really a downside or an upside, but I do like that for the most part, you're never doing both at the same time. Plus, each time you fight monsters, you'll end up with sand for the next platforming segment. The next major platforming room is the first instance of Farah assisting us with a puzzle. It's all automatic and essentially scripted. She is almost on the complete opposite side of the room from us, providing us with an alternate view and giving hints. I will say that for the most part, the puzzles in this game can be so linear that they don't really feel like puzzles, aside from learning the timing for certain jumps. Once we get to the bottom, we have to take care of some enemies, which shouldn't be too hard, and oh my god, did I just get shot by Farah? She killed me. At least she said she was sorry. I forgot to mention this earlier when I was praising her, but for some reason her arrows injure us as well. This only happened to me a few times, but when it did, it usually killed me or set me up to get absolutely walloped. After exiting the storage room, we enter the next area, the King's Zoo. I really enjoyed the set design here with the night sky hanging overhead. The outdoor areas are my favorite. Every time we exit the palace, we get a general idea of how much time has passed since the prince's adventure began. We climb a suspiciously empty birdcage at this point and make our way to the top, giving us an amazing view of the complex that we are navigating. We'll find out where all those birds went soon enough. Something that I haven't touched on yet is the prince's narration throughout the game. It does a great job of framing the game as a fable or a fairy tale, but the moments I enjoy the most are the in-game dialogues. The moments between the prince and Farah, and the times when the prince thinks he is alone and thinks out loud. The lines do a much better job of characterizing the prince moment to moment for me than the narration does.
Now how do I get through?
I don't know. Can't you crawl through a crack or something?
Now we reach another roadblock. In this segment, we just need to climb some ledges and trees and reach a lever on the other side. It should be easy, but one thing kept getting in my way. The birds. I went through this entire segment without figuring out a truly efficient way of fighting them. The length of your sword is just too short to reach them most of the time. And again, the speed of your swings is just slow enough that they will hit you before you can swat them out of the air. At some point, I gave up on strategy and just ran past as many of them as I could, leading to an all-out birdemic level fight on top of a cliff. Luckily, the water from the stream up here can heal you, so through pure brute force, I was able to take them down and move on. This is not the best way to handle this. In fact, it's probably the wrong way, but it was my way, and I did it. I hate these birds. They are my least favorite enemy in the entire game because they make me feel stupid and they are mean. With the birds gone, we can now re-enter the palace and continue forward into the next location, the baths. After clearing out all of the demons in the bathhouse, we have to figure out how to progress. After saving and seeing the future, I think I have the gist of what I need to do, and I just need to... Oh my god, no. Please. Son of a... Again? I waited until now to mention this because this is the location that it happened to me probably the most, but the save locations can be incredibly frustrating. They have a much larger area of effect than their size would imply, and if you get too close, you are almost sucked into them. This one in particular is placed in this thin walkway, and every time I try to walk past it, I immediately get sucked into it. And no, I do not learn my lesson, and yes, I do continue to do this like 6 more times before just jumping over the side. This area is also the first that I have to look up a walkthrough for. I know I need to push a block through this hole, but what I couldn't figure out is where that block went. I eventually found out it was placed in the previous area of the baths, and I needed to backtrack to it. See, you needed this block in order to climb a ladder you couldn't reach previously in that room. Why? Well, since you're standing in water, when you try to run up the wall, your feet are slippery. Now that we're on the second level, we can follow this hallway back to the room we were in previously and reach our first sword upgrade. What? Why did he just smack it on the floor? This new sword has the capability to break certain things like wooden doors and also cracked walls. We break through a wall into the ancient ruins beneath the palace, the foundations of something much older and unknown, relegated to myth and fairy tale. As we enter the first section in this zone and we get a sweeping angle of the room, I immediately have flashbacks to Assassin's Creed 2. One of my favorite areas in that game, and probably the sections that I played the most, were the hidden levels where you find the seals for the upgraded armor for Ezio. Something about the decrepit and crumbling architecture, mixed with the beams of light streaking in, immediately put a smile on my face. This section is short and is mostly used as a connecting thread between the previous level of the bathhouse and the next zone, the guards' quarters. We will, however, return here later. There are lots of enemies in this stage, and they start to up the difficulty here. Yes, there are a lot of them, but the fluidity of the combat and the speed at which you can take enemies down means that this isn't really an issue. What does make the battles harder here is the enemy types that make up these fights. Most enemies at this point will block your attacks and stop you from doing the backflip backstab combo that I've been using for most of the game at this point. This leads to more methodical combat moving forward, blocking and parrying, waiting for your moment to strike. I did not do this. Instead, I became even more reliant on my Sans Paralysis ability. Sadly, this was only effective sometimes due to the number of enemies I froze, ultimately coming back to life before I could finish the job. I would also take many more risky water breaks from this point forward. Once we climb to the top of the barracks, we have to lower the drawbridge and fight the demons on top of it. According to some guides, there is a well-known skip to avoid actually fighting these guys that's easy to trigger. I was worried I would miss out on something if I did this and chose not to. It's just a semi-difficult fight. If you want to do it, go for it. I can confirm you will not miss out on anything. After crossing the bridge, we climb the tower on the opposite side, working in tandem with Farah to inch higher and higher as a team. At this point, they're beginning to let their guard down with each other and become more amicable towards each other. They've begun to have a rapport and also developed a method to how they approach challenges together, openly communicating and... Oh, okay, he just ripped off his sleeves. That's cool, I guess. Back to climbing. After reaching the top, we run into more birds. At this point, I decide it might be in my best interest to attempt coming up with some sort of strategy for fighting these things. The only opening I can find is right after they attack when they stay within the range of the sword, leading me to do the unthinkable: blocking. This makes the encounter so much easier. We are now, once again, outside the palace and can see that it is now daybreak.
With women, you need to show them you're in charge right from the start.
Farah and the prince become separated by a gate, leading to the prince being alone with his thoughts for the first time in a few hours. Oh god, more birds! Surprisingly, we are still being introduced to new platforming mechanics even this far into the game. We're now challenged with balance beam segments. With birds. Most of the time, I found it easier just to hang off the ledges than to walk on top of them, but there are a few points where you need to be standing on top of them in order to make a jump at the right angle. Fun fact, you can swing your sword while balancing, and you should do this. You are not fast enough to get past the birds without killing them first, and you will need to be fast here. In order to get to the exit, you'll have to wall run across a gate that is actively falling down on a timer. This is one of the tightest timed segments, and even being off by a few seconds is enough for the gate to be too low for you to run across. We finally pass the door and re-enter the caves, and the prince's mind begins to wander again.
Oh, have you been waiting here all this time? I didn't realize you meant these baths. I went to the other baths, clear across the other side of the city. I had a lovely wash and a rub with fragrant oils. Too bad you weren't there. Stop talking to yourself!
This is probably one of my favorite segments in this area. Everything is falling apart, and you have to commit to the run. Once you start going, you can't stop, or you'll start from the beginning. It's another moment that just feels good to play. We continue our journey through the caves until eventually breaking into the sewer system of the palace, and holy crap, this part is straight out of AC2, I swear. This is probably my favorite area from an aesthetic perspective. Once again, with the light dancing across the space and the water along the floor. It's also one of the only rooms that looks truly purpose-built. This isn't a platforming level that looks like a cistern. It is a cistern, and you have to figure out how to traverse it. We're also introduced to another mechanic, rope swinging. It's rope swinging. It works the same way it does in every game. You go back and forth and then you jump. That's all there is to it. After climbing up out of the well, we find ourselves on a patio space attached to the baths and deal with some enemies. Okay, I know I just said rope swings are nothing special, but this little moment warned me that it may not be as simple as it looks. It was absolutely terrifying while kicking off of these buttons back onto the rope. Going back to floor spikes for a moment and how they indicate to you what not to do, for some reason I thought the only way to reach that platform was to wall run. I attempted this multiple times before trying to jump. Something Occam's razor. I never met the guy. As we head further into the bathhouse, we run into Farah and have to figure out how to reunite with her. Now, we've gone from amicable to outwardly caring about and being concerned for the safety of Farah. And it looks like Farah is starting to feel the same way.
My love, please don't leave me.
What did you call me?
It doesn't matter. The important thing is, I know how we can reach the Tower of Dawn.
Of course, the hourglass. All right. But this time, stay with me and pay attention. Can't spend all day chasing after you.
Now that we've regrouped, it's time to move on to the next area, the library. After clearing out the place, we have to solve the second most memorable puzzle in the game, and one that I feared. I am terrible at light-based puzzles. Always have been. In fact, when I was younger, this would often be the make or break moment that would decide whether or not I would get to finish a game at all. I don't know what it is about them that is so difficult for me. Maybe my spatial reasoning is just trash, but if I had to make a guess, I would say that it's the accuracy required to solve most of them. This one isn't as guilty of it, but there are times where being a hair of a degree off on these things can lead to a cascading effect until the final result is so off the mark that even though the answer is correct, I have to tinker with it for an hour to get it right. Luckily for me, the creators of this game knew dumb little idiots like me would be playing this and tell you exactly where to put them by leaving scuff marks on the ground for where they should be placed. The prince is a bit distracted by other thoughts while I try to solve this puzzle, though.
At least, I think I didn't. It's quite natural, really. Her kingdom's conquered, she has nothing, no one to protect her. She needs me. I can see it in the way she looks at me. All I'd have to do is reach out and take her hand, and she'd be mine. Why am I talking to myself?
After solving the first part of the puzzle, a platform is raised, leading to a second level. We continue the light beam and use it to activate the next segment. This next part hurt me. After meeting up with Farah on the other side, we continue the path and find another mirror for reflecting the light beam, and a node to direct the light towards. I set it up on the smudge that's nearby, and then I realize I need the light to be redirected. And for some reason, no matter how many times I rub my two little brain cells together, I just can't process that all I need to do is swap these two mirrors so that the light goes left instead of right. I just kept processing it as this mirror makes the light go down, which is right, but only when the light is reflected from that angle. Why am I explaining this? You know how it works. I'm the dummy here. Anyway, I don't know, like 20 minutes later, I finally figure it out and get the door open. This leads to us getting another new sword. This one doesn't add any new abilities, but it does hit harder than the last one. The next puzzle is pretty easy, and by that I mean I don't think I'd even consider it a puzzle. The planetarium above our head has bars that we need to rotate to get to the other side. We jump across to get to the far side, flick a switch to rotate everything, and swing across to the door you need to reach. Really cool set piece, though. It's nothing special, but I love the moment in the next hallway afterwards.
Look, a crack!
Wait, let's see where this corridor goes. All right, you can take the crack.
This whole segment feels like a solid bonding moment between Farah and the prince. Farah trying to be more acrobatic like the prince, and him supporting her efforts and also showing concern. We continue our journey through the gardens, and the prince reflects on the possible future he could have with Farah.
I could marry her. After all, she is a Maharaja's daughter. A conquered one, but still. Her blood is royal. Besides, what better way to tame her insolence? It's not so bad for a woman to have a little spirit. It's a challenge!
As we run along the walls surrounding the palace, we can see the tower in the distance much closer than it was at the beginning of the game. As we continue around the walls, the floor beneath us crumbles, and we are once again separated from Farah, deep within the palace's prison.
Here I was, myself a prisoner, seeking an escape.
And the shirt comes off completely. I've been comparing this game a lot to its successor, but this moment in particular made me remember another game, Batman Arkham Asylum. Now, I'm not going to say these games are remotely similar to each other in gameplay, but narratively they do share some things in common. Throughout the game, both characters continually get hurt and put through the ringer. This is reflected in the wear and tear of their clothing. Their stories also take place over the course of one day, pushing them to their limits and forcing them to break through those limits to get out the other side. Now, unlike with Batman, with the prince, his clothes being damaged and removed also reflect his growth throughout the story. He starts out as a young boy, wishing only for his father's approval and seeking respect and glory through emulating the actions of those around him. He's then separated from all of those influences in his life and is forced to make his own decisions and right the wrongs of his actions. He continues to mature and shed that boyish outlook as he removes more and more of his royal garb, until finally in this scene, he has become his own man. This segment had some great platforming moments in it, including the initial descent of the prison, along with the climb out of it. I'd say this is probably my second favorite platforming moment in the game. After breaking out of the prison, we're once again reunited with Farah and fight off some monsters in the courtyard. We're coming up on, in my opinion, one of the most difficult fights in the game, but before that we have another vision revealing to us that Farah might still be conspiring against us. It was clear to me that this was just some late-game tension based on a misunderstanding. At least, I thought so. The visions don't lie. They do show exactly what happens, but the context is missing. It's probably fine. After opening the gate to the tower, we enter an elevator that is suspiciously large. Just large enough for us to have a fight. Yep, we're screwed. We have to survive multiple waves of enemies here. I'm not sure if this event is based on time or number of enemies killed, but it takes a while. And if you look up, you'll see the elevator is actually an endless loop. Either way, with that out of the way, we can finally place the dagger in the hourglass. Or not.
Give me the dagger.
The dagger! He must not get the dagger!
I had faced my enemy. I had looked into his eyes, and I had lost everything.
We find ourselves sealed in a tomb with Farah, and things finally come to a head between the two. After being locked away together, they finally share their feelings to each other, and Farah reveals a bit about her past. With an exit found, we journey further into the unknown depths of the tomb. Things get a bit trippy here, starting with this bottomless staircase straight out of Mario 64. Now, magic exists in this world. We know that. We also know the seams between reality and the world of magic have plenty of holes and places you can slip between. We never truly get an explanation of where we are, but the most literal interpretation I can think of is that the word Farah uttered was some sort of spell or calling out to the other plane, and the door they entered was an entrance to that other world. The place that we are currently in is some sort of safe house that Farah's mother knew of. But that's just my interpretation. We now have to do one of the worst puzzles in the game, involving running through these doors until we eventually find Farah. This one made no sense to me, and I ended up looking up a guide. If I had to guess how you were supposed to solve it, I'd say brute force. There's a certain order you have to walk through the doors, like a combination lock. If you enter a door and are sent to the entrance, you went through the wrong one. If you get spat out at a different door, then you made the right choice. You keep wandering through the doors until you move up a level, then do it again. I can see what their goal was here with the dreamlike atmosphere and nonsensical logic, but I feel like if I solved this on my own, it would have overstayed its welcome. We eventually find Farah, and a cutscene plays out of them finally embracing. The prince then wakes up back in the tomb alone without the dagger. This last light puzzle stumped me, but that's because I thought all of the light pillars needed to be illuminated in order to unlock the sword, when in fact, all you need to do is light up this hole. Now, I think my assumption is fairly understandable, but they did make the solution last time get the light in the hole. I just thought, oh, this one is going to be harder than the last, so it must be this insane answer I came up with. No, same as always, put light in hole. After solving this puzzle, we now have the best sword in the game. It instantly kills enemies, turning them into dust. I like that we get better swords as we continue, but why can the last one dust enemies? I get mechanically that since we don't have the dagger, no enemy would stay dead, but like, narratively, that's the whole point, right? What is this sword hidden at the bottom of the temple, guarded by a red aura? Is it related to the dagger in the sand somehow? This will bug me much more than it should, especially since for the most part this game is pretty tightly written. Now we start the final challenge of the game, climbing to the top of the tower from the outside. This is it. This is the final test of skill. This is what it all comes down to. You have to use all the knowledge you've gained up until this point. So, as I was saying, the whole final climb up the tower is a giant skill check. Do you know and understand all of the movement skills we've taught you? If not, get ready to hurt. It really hurts when you get it wrong, but that final run, when you know you did it perfectly with no rewinds to assist you, just pure skill, it feels good. Once we reach the lower entrance to the tower, we see Farah slip away, and the prince shouts,
Farah! Come back!
She must be using the dagger.
Farah, be careful! Don't use up all the sand!
He's not angry that she stole the dagger, he's concerned for her safety. He knows what she's planning on doing and understands why she feels she needs to do it herself. Scaling the tower will take time, a lot of deaths, and careful planning. There are save points, but they are spread pretty far out. However, nothing feels better than once you finally reach the top.
Farah, no!
Those sneaky writers actually thought this through. Not only does the prince shouting to Farah not to use all the sand show his concern for her, it also sets up her death. In a world where time can be rewound, it's hard to kill someone. But since they made it clear Farah was using the sands, her death now becomes permanent. She can't rewind time in the cutscene, and we can't once we get the dagger back because it's actually empty. It just seemed like such an easy plot hole to walk into that I just assumed they would, but no. I don't understand why she decided to wander off and do this on her own, without the prince though. She could have just waited for him to wake up. We rage out and kill some sand demons, and the prince reflects one final time on his journey before approaching the hourglass.
Do not be afraid. This belongs to you.
The dagger of time. But it is locked away within my father's treasure vault. How?
Most people think time is like a river that flows swift and sure.
This moment got me. As soon as the narration began, I got so excited. This idea that the narration that we've heard this entire time is actually the prince retelling the journey he and Farah went on together with Farah is such a solid narrative moment. A bit cliche for time travel stories, but it works really well here. With Farah filled in on what's happening, there's nothing left to do but kill the vizier that started this all to begin with. This battle isn't anything special and ends relatively quickly. With the vizier defeated, the prince bids farewell to the princess.
Wait. I don't even know your name.
Just call me Kakolukia.
Wait. This whole story. It took me until the very end, but this is basically Aladdin, right? The evil vizier, the prince and the princess, just swap out the dagger of time for a magic lamp. Like, it's obviously there's some differences, but broad strokes, it's Aladdin. Why can't we get more fun stories like this based on old myths? Wait, no, not like that. I know that myth plays a very important role in that series, but Ubisoft kind of put themselves in a hole where if they want to tell a story based on a myth or fable now, it's just set dressing for Assassin's Creed games, and the magic and mystery of something like the Dagger of Time or the Apple of Eden gets sucked out of it because we know what it is. We understand that anything that seems like magic is always Old One's tech. The introduction of the Isu was really cool and all, but now they seem to have this urge to always include it in the plot of the games. King Arthur's sword, the Apple of Eden, it's all just sci-fi now. They could have had so much more fun if they just left it vague. Heck, I'm willing to bet if I Google it right now, there's going to be at least one fan theory saying that the Sands of Time are in fact Isu tech, and that honestly just really bums me out. I feel like if Ubisoft continued down the route that they made with Prince of Persia, twists on well-known fables with creative mechanics, we could have had an awesome, long-standing franchise. Instead, they made a sequel to Sands of Time, which I will get to eventually, trust me. I just think it's really disappointing that Ubisoft didn't spread their wings and experiment more until they got around to making Assassin's Creed. And now they're making endless sequels of that, too. They're going full Marvel on it. This game gave me a window into what Ubisoft used to be before they became the sequel factory that they are today, and honestly, that is very bittersweet for me. Not too long ago, if I saw Ubisoft's logo on the cover of a game, I knew that I was going to be in for a good time. But that hasn't been their reputation for over a decade now. Regardless of the paths their creators would take in the future, Prince of Persia stands to be one of the greatest games they ever created in the past. I cannot recommend this game enough to anybody who enjoys 3D platforming, the Assassin's Creed series, or just good games in general. There were a few moments that had me stumped, but even with those included, my final completion time blind for Prince of Persia Sands of Time was just under 10 hours. There truly is no reason for you not to give this game a shot if something sounded interesting to you in this video. And with that, I'm going to close things off and give Prince of Persia an 8 out of 10. So I just wanted to take a moment, because I didn't at the end of my last video, to thank everybody for watching. I'm trying to do better about making videos at least once a month, depending on how long the game itself takes. Because of that, I am going to be kind of restricting the types of games that I play. I don't think I'll be playing any other JRPGs or very densely packed narrative games anytime soon, just because it really did just take a lot out of me to do that Drakengard video. Even though it was technically done over a year ago, I just had to put some finishing touches on it. It drained me. I was serious about that. But seeing the reactions that I've been getting from that last video, and hopefully continuing to get from this one, I am actually excited to continue making more stuff like this. At this point, I think I would like to get some recommendations from anybody who's stuck around this long. If there's a game that you would like to hear me talk about, leave a comment, let me know, and I will see about giving it a shot. I really do, like I said at the beginning, like this kind of train that I'm on right now, where I'm looking at these older games that relate to the future of gaming or the current generation of gaming in some way, whether it's a series that's continued to live on, like the God of War series in Devil May Cry, or led to a modern series that we still have today, kind of like how Prince of Persia led to Assassin's Creed. If there's any other games like that out there, I would really like to see those. Eventually, I'll get back to JRPGs. Eventually. But other than that, I just want to say, once again, thank you for watching.